Çok sağ olun. Teşekkürler.
Okay. Okay.
استاد ببخشید
بگو.
ممکن صفحه 44 رو یه بار دیگه تکرار کنی؟
Let me go back. I'll check it. This one. Okay. Share it again. Okay. Your friend have a question about the renal pelvis and this slide. I try to explain again. If you remember, we talked about the renal pyramids. Let me take my laser pointer. We talk about the renal pyramid.
Hocam şu an slaytı paylaşmıyorsunuz sanırım.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. I check it again. Okay. I think everything is okay. Your friend have a question about the renal pelvis. I try to explain them again. If you remember, we divided the parenchyma into the cortex and medulla part. Medulla is divided into the pyramid shape parts that names as a renal pyramids. Renal pyramids connected, the tip of the renal pyramids connected to the initiate part of the urinary tract that's famous as a minor calyx. These are each pyramid connected to the related minor calyx. Minor calyx connected to each other and made the major calyx. Major calyx totally connected and make a big structure that names as a renal pelvis. Renal pelvis is located at the site of the hilum of the kidney. In this part or this tips of the, if I magnified one pyramid, you can see it look like it. It's the cortex part of the one pyramid, and this is the medulla part of one pyramid, and this is the tip of this pyramid. At the level of this tip, each nephron is made a urine transport into the collection canal. Each collection canal opened at the side of this apex. At the surface, that names as a cribriform plate because we have lots of foramen on this plate. Each foramen or each opening names as a papillary foramen, but as a total, this surface names as a cribriform plate. It's a spatial plate at the side of the renal papilla. The major structure names as a renal papilla, that's pores surface is named as a cribriform plate. Each pore is named as a papillary foramen. I think I answered your question. If you have anything unclear, tell me to explain again. Okay. In the second section of the lesson, we try to learn vessels of the kidney and different vascularization inside a kidney and structure of the nephron. First of all, I like to talk about a vein. If you be careful on the photo in the right side, you can see the right renal vein and left renal vein and right renal vein. We have a difference into the lengths of these two veins because the inferior vena cava, that the point of the drainage of these two veins is nearer to the right side. For this reason, the right renal vein is shorter when compared with the left ones. The left ones is a longer, but the right ones is a shorter. It's totally about the position of the inferior vena cava. In the right side, this artery that crossed the left renal kidney is superior mesenteric artery. If you remember, we talked about that in digestive system because it's supply blood for the vast majority of organs in digestive system. It's joined to inferior vena cava, as I mentioned before. The right renal kidney, right renal vein, is shorter, joined to inferior vena cava at about at the same level. It's so important. Both of them connected to inferior vena cava at the same level. The arteries around the kidney is so different. Some branches of the renal artery is not related directly to the kidney. For example, we have a branch that supply blood for the suprarenal gland. We have different branches goes down and supply blood for the ureter that names as a ureteric artery. And we have a capsular artery. You can see it in this side, goes up, give off from the branch of the renal artery and supply blood for the fibrous capsule of the kidney. Another branch, or the branch is directly goes inside, is named as a segmental branch. We have a 5-segment functional segment in each kidney, and these are named as a superior, anterior superior. Let's take a look to them. Superior is the red ones, anterior superior, anterior inferior, inferior, and posterior segments. Why it's important? The segmental artery of the kidney goes to each segments, and these are the end arteries. There are not have any anastomosis with each other. If the one segmental artery closed by some things, that part of or that segments of the kidney is necrosed. It's so important. We see the same things in lungs. We see the same things, for example, in some organs that organize segmentally, but we can see the same things in a kidney too. As I mentioned, we have a different segmental artery. These are the end artery, goes into the related segments and supply blood for there. These are superior, anterior superior, anterior inferior, inferior, and posterior artery, posterior segmental artery. As I see, it's related about the 5 segments of the liver. You can see all of this branch. This is the posterior ones. This is the superior ones, anterior superior, anterior inferior, and inferior segmental artery. As totally, these are famous as a segmental artery. After a segmental artery gives off, after going inside the sinus, gives off the 2 lobar artery. If you remember, we named the one pyramid and related cortex as a lobe of the kidney. These are goes between the lobes. Between the lobes, at this side, the name of the artery is changed because divided into both branch. Its names at this side, its names as an interlobar artery. Goes up, curved at the base between and passed between the cortex and medulla, or at the base of the pyramid. It's named as a arcuate artery. And the last or final branch of them can see morphologically is named as a interlobular artery. If I repeat again, we talk about the renal artery in both sides. Renal artery is a branch of the abdominal artery. One of them named as a right renal artery goes to the right kidney. Left renal artery goes to the left kidney. And these are emerge at the level of the emerge side of the superior mesenteric artery. One of them goes to the left side, one of them goes to the right side, and then divided into the main branches, named as a segmental artery. After that gives off the lobar artery, then named as a interlobar, arcuate, and interlobular artery. This is the organization of artery inside the parenchyma of the kidney. If I repeat it again, aorta gives off right and left renal kidney. Renal artery divided into 5 segmental artery, enters from the hilum of the kidney. Segmental artery branch into lobar artery. Lobars divided into interlobar, interlobar into arcuate, in the junction of the cortex and medulla at the base of the pyramids. Arcuates send interlobular arteries into cortex. Sometimes these are named as a cortical arteries. Sometimes these are have a lesser branch that names as a cortical radiate arteries. And this lesser arteries goes inside each nephron that names as a afferent arteriole. If you repeat it again, you can see the same artery, same structure in a Mayer photo: renal, segmental, lobar, interlobar, arcuate, interlobular. And if we look to this side, with a close look to this side, you can see this image. This artery is interlobular artery, gives off a spatial artery that names as a afferent arteriole, goes inside a Bowman capsule and make a capillary named as a glomerulus inside a nephron. And after that, done different things, made a filtrate inside a filtrate, secreted the filtrate inside a Bowman capsule. And after sending a filtrate inside a Bowman capsule, it's collect to the efferent arteriole. Okay, it's a totally circulation of the artery inside a kidney. The veins in the kidney generally names as an artery, but in their passed in reverse direction. It's start at the level of the interlobular vein, interlobular vein, arcuate vein, then interlobar vein, we don't have segmental vein or lobar vein. Directly, interlobular vein connected to each other and made renal vein. It's the difference between arterial structure and venous structure. The venous structure is simpler than the artery because the name of the branches is lesser than in veins. If I repeat it again, it's start majorly with the interlobular vein, then arcuate vein, their interlobar vein connected to each other and made the renal vein. Totally renal vein drain the venous blood of the kidney into inferior vena cava. You can see the same things as a chart. As I mentioned before, the arterial system at the end point connected to the afferent arteriole goes inside a renal corpuscle, goes inside the glomerulus side, and then gives off by the efferent arteriole, and it's connected to the venous system and goes the reverse pathway, by the reverse pathway to the inferior vena cava. Okay. What we can see if we see the parenchyma closer or see it under microscope. The renal parenchyma consists of uniferous tubules, uriniferous tubules, and blood vessels. What's the means of uriniferous tubules? The tubules that made the urine for us. In another word, it's the tubules that connected, or the tubules is a part of the nephron. And we can see a blood vessels, as I mentioned before. The blood vessel transferred the blood with the waste material through the renal artery. It's filtrated, and after the filtration and reabsorption, the needed material goes inside the venous system and collected from the brain. Uriniferous tubules is made of the nephrons that inside is initiated from the renal corpuscle, renal tubule, and collecting tubule that we mentioned before. These are a part of the nephrons, but collecting tubule is look like a million numbers of vast majority of nephrons connected to them in different level. You can see the collecting canal in central part. 3/3 of them is seen in this picture. The different nephron in different level connected to this collecting canal and transferred the produced urine into this canal. Uriniferous tubule is the main structure and functional unit in the kidney. More than 1.5 million of these tubules act together to form urine. We have 3 main mechanisms inside a uriniferous tubule. Glomerular tubule made a filtrate, a directly filtration of the blood collected inside this capsule because the pressure inside this arteriole is high. The plasma and other things comes out from the pores of this glomerulus, this capillary system, and this liquid is named as a filtrate. After that, in different tubules, and the body is reabsorb things they need. For example, reabsorb extra water, reabsorbs the initiate ions and something else into a blood again, and sometimes excreted some things inside the blood and made urine finally. The main point of making the urine or functional unit of the kidney is nephron. Nephron is made of different parts. For example, the first part of the nephron is the spheroid side, named as a renal corpuscle located inside a cortex. This is imaging photo of one lobe of the kidney. The renal corpuscle is consists of the two main structure, the glomerulus inside this corpuscle and a spatial capsule surrounding it. It's named as a Bowman's capsule. If you remember, generally you see this information in high school, but I think maybe you forget it. The tubular section is made of three different parts: proximal convolute tubule, loop of Henle, and distal convoluted tubule. Totally, the nephron is this in this part. And after that, distal convoluted tubule in different levels connected to collecting canal. It's you can imagine it as a tree. The trunk of the tree is collecting canal, but the minor branches into the lateral side is the distal convoluted tubule in different levels. As I mentioned before, the nephron have a different part. You can see them in this photo. I marked them as a number. The first one is a glomerulus surrounding by the Bowman's capsule. Excuse me. Surrounding by Bowman's capsule. It's made a filtration. The second part is a proximal convoluted tubule. In this side, we can see the reabsorption of main material and water, and sometimes ions. The third part is the loop of Henle, have two limbs, descending limbs and ascending limbs. And distal convoluted tubule is seen in there. This nephron is connected to the collecting canal. Secretion is the last function of this part of the nephron. Distal convoluted tubule secreted the urine into the collecting canal. You can see the same things. I like to mention or imagine the nephron from different image. This is the main side or the side of the renal corpuscle. As I mentioned before, the afferent arteriole comes and goes inside a renal corpuscle. Renal corpuscle is made of the two main components, the inside glomerulus and outer side Bowman capsule. The filtrate comes out. This liquid is collected and send it into proximal convoluted tubule. Here's all of this picture is saying. But in nephrons, in renal corpuscle, we can talk about a two-pole. It's so important. We have two different pole in the renal corpuscle. One of them is the side for entrance of the capillary system, or entrance of afferent arteriole and exits of the efferent arteriole. And another pole of this this structure is named as a tubular pole. It's the initiate part of the proximal convoluted tubule. You can see the exit of or direction of the fluid flow inside a Bowman capsule. Comes out from the capillary and goes inside a proximal convoluted tubule. As I mentioned before, nephron totally consists of the renal corpuscle and renal tubules. Renal tubules consist of the proximal convolute tubule, loop of Henle, and distal convoluted tubule. Filtrate is the liquid that produce at the site of the renal corpuscle. Then nephron empties tubular fluid into collecting system, and collecting ducts open to the papillary ducts or papillary foramen, the last part of the collecting duct. You can see the same things. You can see the different. It's so complicated mechanism. I think it's about the physiology of urinary system. Your professor is explain these topics in there, but I like to learn or I like to teach the anatomy of the nephron and different part of the nephron. But waste material or reabsorption have a complicated mechanism. For example, salt or some things is absorbed from the proximal convoluted or some materials or calcium ions is reabsorbed from the distal convoluted tubule. It's difference between the ions and something else. We have a totally two type of nephron. One of them named as a cortical nephron. Totally 85% of all nephrons is from this type. This group totally located inside a cortex of the kidney. But we have another type named as a juxtamedullary nephron. Juxtamedullary nephron is a nephron. Juxta is nearer to the medulla. The nephrons that nearer to the medulla. It's the Latin name of this because it's nearer to the medulla or closer to the renal medulla and have a long loop of the Henle. It goes down deep inside a renal pyramids. The cortical nephron originated in outer two-thirds of the cortex. In another word, the juxtamedullary nephrons is originated in inner one-third. You can divide it, the cortical region, if we can divide it or imagine three layer in cortex. And the cortical nephron located in about 2/3, but juxtamedullary nephron located in below 1/3 of this region. But it's so important to remember that the renal corpuscle totally located inside a cortex, located inside the cortex of the kidney. And in both type, if you be careful, in both type, the renal corpuscle located inside a cortical part of the kidney, and it's the point that you had to remember every time. You can see the same things. It's an example of the cortical nephron, and in another side you can see example of the juxtamedullary nephron. Generally, we can separate them by the length of the loop of Henle. If be careful, the cortical nephron have a shorter loop of Henle, but in a juxtamedullary nephron, we have a long loop of Henle that comes down to the deep side of the renal pons. You can see the same things. We talk about a different section of the tubular system. It's made of the proximal convolate, a loop of Henle, and distal convolate. Loop of Henle, we can divide the loop of Henle into descending limb, thin segment, and ascending limb. Descending limb is thicker compared to the thin segments and ascending limb. You can see it. It's a difference about the function of these places, but you have to know it. Distal convoluted tubule confined to the renal cortex. It's covered by simple cuboidal epithelium, selective secretion and reabsorption of ions is generally done in this place, distal convoluted tubule, and a main ion is selected in this side or reabsorbed in this side is a calcium. We talk about that more. We talk about a collecting duct. Is the most important role in conserve body fluid. When the body most conserve water, the posterior pituitary gland or hypophyseal gland secreted ADH or antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone increase the permeability of this collecting duct, and it's in collecting duct and distal tubule to water, so more is reabsorbed. This decrease the total volume of urine, but for example, after the consumption of alcohol inhibit the release of ADH, so less water is reabsorbed, and it can cause to dehydration. These are minor things. It's not important for you. Efferent and afferent arterioles associated with glomerular capillary allows high pressure for forcing filtrate out of the blood. We talked about that before. About 20% of renal plasma flow is filtrated each minute. Totally 125 milliliter in minute per minute is the rate of the filtrate produced, but this is generally named as a GFR or glomerular filtration rate. It's so important factor generally used in clinics to measure of the renal function. You had to know it, maybe heard somewhere. Um, this is about 1 liter every 8 minutes, but only it's the rate of the filtrate, but only 1% of this fluid ends up as a urine. It's another things I like to talk about, that GFR is so important. You have to know it. It's not your, it's a detail for you. The last things or the last disease I like to talk about that is a polycystic kidney disease and the kidney stones. Let's start by polycystic kidney disease. This disease is an inherited disorder in which clusters of the cysts develop primarily within your kidney, causing your kidney to enlarge and lose the function over the time. It's the idiopathic condition, but have a different theory to explain the cause of this disease. Some scientists think that it's genetically. Cysts are non-cancerous round sacs containing fluid. The cysts vary in size and they can grow very larger by the time. Another thing is that's so common is the kidney stones. Kidney stones, also called as a renal calculi, nephrolithiasis, or urolithiasis, are a hard deposit made of mineral and salts that form inside a kidney and can close some part of this tract inside a kidney or in another part of the tract, outer side, sometimes a part of the narrowest part of the ureter or urethra is closed by these stones. We have 4 main type of kidney stones. It can maybe of the calcium oxalate stones, uric acid stones, steroid stones, and cystine stones. It's about our diet, excess body weight, some medical condition, or some supplements and medication are among the many causes of the kidney stone. But most of scientists and physicians thinks that it can be genetically, but another factor is a main factor to cause this in normal condition. It's so common. Okay, if you have a question, I think it's our today lesson is finished. If you have a question, I'm ready to answer.